welcome all to our council meeting. Firstly, I don't have any apologies that I've been made aware of. Any conflicts of interest? So we come to confirmation of minutes, item 3.1, pages 16 to 38. I understand, Councillor Barnett, you have some corrections. Do you wish to advise what they are?
I simply emailed through a couple of tiny corrections for spelling and so on, but also added the comment in my section on the panel for the Chief Executive appointment that it was the most important decision this council will make this term, which was not noted in the minutes.
Okay, and there was one other, Adrian, there as well, because it wasn't speaking to the amendment, was it? It was speaking to the motion, yes, so it was just correcting that. All right, with that, have I someone prepared to move that? Do you wish to move that as true and correct record with those changes, Councillor Barnett? Seconded by Councillor Redmond. I'll put any discussion, I'll put that, all those in favour, aye. Contrary, declare that carried. We'll come to 3.2 and 3.3 in public excluded. Matters arising. You had an item, Councillor Barnett?
Yes, just to note that the Ravenswood plan change had not been notified in time for this meeting. It's now being notified this weekend and submissions close on the 4th of December. My question to the CE is how we want to proceed, whether we want to do a submission and bring it to the December council meeting, considering that it's the 1st of December and we do actually have time to do that.
Given it is the 1st of December, it would be preferable. The alternate was going to be circulate and seek ratification, but if there is time, then at this time, that seems the most appropriate approach.
Thank you. Any other matters arising? I have no deputations and presentations. There's no adjourned business. So we come to item 6, which is COVID-19 recovery planning. The first is 6.1, a report on Mr. Cleary and Mr. Simpson. Mr. Roxburgh, please come forward. That's pages 39 to 101. My understanding is you've got a new H to circulate as well, Colin. Is that right? Thank you. Hi, Rob.
So only H is new, which is highlighted. So you don't need to read the full set again.
So, Colin, that H is just being inserted in. The other resolutions remain, so it's a new
Yes.
H.
Yeah,
so
that's
the
right.
others would then just follow, yeah?
Yep.
Thank you. So it's what's been circulated here.
Yep. Cool. So
Okay.
I'll
Thank
kick
you,
off.
Colin.
Yep, thank you. So this report is on the funding of the projects receiving government stimulus funding. The purpose is to gain approval of the funding approach of these projects, and this follows on from the reports at the 22nd of September meeting to allocate the projects and the subsequent briefing to work through a few of the funding options. The outcomes from this report will be to confirm the budgets for the different projects and the split of the budgets between level of service and growth, to confirm the scheme contributions towards projects and subsequent rating impacts, and to allow consultation to proceed on the basis of those two decisions. And it also covers off some of the earlier technical questions that had been raised through earlier processes with attached memos to cover some of those questions off as well. So I thought I'd just work through a few of the key schemes. This should be familiar from what was presented in the briefing, but I thought it would be good to provide a recap. So in terms of Fernside to start with, this project has a total budget of about $1.3 million. It's proposed that there be a scheme contribution of about $290,000 and a growth contribution of $125,000, and this would result in a final rate final rate of about $1,500 per connection per year. So at the moment, Fernside is at about $2,400 per connection per year.
Sorry to disturb you, because it's just quite quiet. Finding it hard to hear. I've got my
Okay,
volume up.
I'll carry on if this is any better. Otherwise, I'll just try to speak up a little. So just to carry on with Fernside, so that would there's a direct scheme contribution and a growth portion, which gives their final rate, and it's also acknowledged that there would be a future sale of land from the wastewater treatment plant site, which would then be given to the Eastern District scheme, and also the account balance, which would go to the Eastern District sewer scheme. And the other note on Fernside is in order to cover the growth element, we're proposing that a development contribution area, or DCA, be created to ensure that any development within that area pays their required development contribution. Loban-Lee, we used a similar model where there was a scheme contribution, a growth portion, and that would give the final rate for the scheme. So in that case, the scheme contribution was worked out at $620,000. and the growth portion at just over $1.2 million, and that was worked out to give a final rate for Loban-Lee of about $1,680, which is lower than their current rate of about $2,100. And again, that reflects the savings in them paying the Eastern District sewer rate, plus also paying off their scheme contribution on top of that as a loan. We did, in order to get a feel for the balance of the options, the alternative options would have been either they join the Eastern District scheme, so they just pay the Eastern District sewer rate, which would have been a very significant reduction in their rates, and was seen as inequitable or a disproportionate benefit to a small number of ratepayers. The other one we could have looked at is holding their rates steady, which would have increased. To achieve that, it would have meant they give a bigger contribution towards the project, but that would have come with some quite significant consultation risks where we would be trying to gain a community's endorsement of a project, saying that, you know, it's good news, we've got government money to help fund it, but some of them might question why they're not seeing more of a benefit of that funding. So we think we've found a good middle ground of giving them some benefit, but still reflecting in their rates that they would still be the two highest rated schemes, just not as high as they previously were. In terms of Points Road, we're not proposing a scheme contribution towards the wider ratepayer pool, but instead a contribution towards the West Eden and Summerhill schemes is expected, and that's an acknowledgement of the specific history between those two schemes and the ongoing work with the advisory groups there. And we've also looked at a growth portion of that project to ensure that new connections to the Points Road scheme cover a share of the project. So we did a proportional calculation and worked out a growth portion of about $71,000, which would be recovered through new connections to the Points Road scheme, and the extra recommendation which has been circulated was following on from our most recent Points Road advisory group meeting, where it was considered that, as well as paying off a share of the pipeline that they'd be connecting to, new connections on the Points Road scheme should also help pay off a portion of the second well at West Eden, which new connections to West Eden now would pay a share of. So that seems fair that new connections to Points Road that would benefit from that same project would pay a share to that. So that recommendation is just saying to include that project in the Points Road DC as well. In terms of rating impact, the projected rating increase for Points Road is about a 50% increase rather than about a 100% increase. The exact final amount will be subject to the ongoing work with the advisory groups when a final figure is settled on in terms of how much that contribution is between schemes. But it's looking like it's going to be that kind of order of magnitude. Tuahiwi, we're not proposing a scheme contribution, partly because Tuahiwi is not a standalone scheme. It's a part of the Eastern District Sewer Scheme, so if we're proposing a scheme contribution there, it would effectively be the wider Eastern District scheme. But rather, the benefit of this project is that it will offer operational savings to the wider Eastern District's ratepayers. And we've also allowed for growth portions of those projects where applicable. So in terms of wastewater, not for the central part, which is addressing an existing deficiency, but for the extensions of the scheme, there are growth portions allocated for that. And one question that had been raised was in terms of when you allow a growth portion of a project, it means that council has to cover that portion of the project cost up front and then recover it through development contributions. So if you set that too low, you risk developers not paying their fair share of a project and benefiting from the stimulus grant. But if you set that too high, it could get to the point of council taking on an increased level of risk in terms of funding too much up front that if the growth doesn't happen may not be recovered. So we think we've got the balance about right for that, with the amount of connections we're expecting being relatively not too optimistic and not too conservative, and also the resultant development contributions are in line with other similar schemes. And we also looked at, in terms of the amount that council would be covering, there's about $1.98 million worth of growth budgets. So that is some additional cost for council to fund, but at the same time we've removed $3.7 million worth of budgets that we would have been funding otherwise had we not had the stimulus funding. So the net effect is that council is contributing, there's less capital work than there would have otherwise been, even though we're doing a lot more projects than we had planned to do. Just the final couple of points on equity. So equity is partly achieved through the selection of projects, where we've tried to pick a range of projects across the district to give as many ratepayers benefit as we can, but also in terms of the residual balance of the scheme contributions from Fernside and Loewen-Lee. We estimate $560,000 of these scheme contributions to be able to be allocated evenly across the wider ratepayer base. And then I provided a summary in table 2 of the net effects of these scheme contributions, as well as some other minor benefits in terms of operational savings of schemes, and also some other projects that were going to be funded by either Eastern Districts or District UV being taken off the books provides the savings in the wider ratepayer base no longer having to fund these projects. So the net effect, if you look at table 2, for someone who's got a water connection and an Eastern District and a sewer connection, is estimated at about $7 per connection per year. And just the final point I was going to talk to before taking questions was around delegation. So you'll see that there is a couple of recommendations, basically delegating to management team to be able to move budgets between financial years, either if we're ahead of schedule and we're going to finish everything before the end of June, we would need that whole budget within the current financial year, or also to manage the stimulus package of works as a whole, such that if there's unders and overs between projects, given they're all funded from the stimulus cost centre, that we can have those unders and overs without having to report back to council each time. So the example would be one project, prices might be $50,000 higher, another $50,000 lower, rather than lose a month or 6 weeks to request to move that budget from council, that we would report to management team instead. And that's really just due to the practicalities of trying to deliver this large package of work in a short time and trying to avoid too many delays with that. And it's also noted that we'll ensure that there's regular reporting back to council on any of on the whole package of works as a whole, to cover off any changes like that. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Colin. Do Kelly or Jared wish to add anything? I'll come to you, Nikki.
No. Yeah. Yeah, so I think the only thing that Kelly's just noted, in the table and the recommendations, it's got the Points Road DC. That hasn't been updated to reflect the change in adding the West Eden Backup Well project to it. So that would be an addition. So the Points Road DC in the table under recommendation G is $2,080 per unit. That's as a direct result of contributing towards the new pipeline part of the project, and then the contribution to the new well at West Eden would be on top of that, which I think is about, I think it was about $600 for a 2-unit connection. Yeah.
So Colin, are you proposing that would need to change from what's currently sitting here? Is that what you're saying?
I suggest that we, in moving resolution G, say that we could put approximately 2,680, and then put an additional note in that notes that staff will bring the exact figure for the Points Road development contribution to the draft annual plan, draft LTP deliberations for a council resolution.
Sounds
So,
okay.
yeah.
Yep. So that's just adding that to G. Have you got that, Adrian? Yes, to the draft LTP deliberations, yeah. Okay, so I've got firstly councillor Mealings followed by councillor Doody. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Doody?
Just my question is, as we really haven't got to the final figure, that contribution, will that be sufficient if it goes up a bit higher?
That will look. It'll be approximately 2,680, but because it's a resolution of council, we want to just make sure we use the exact figure when it comes to the LTP. But it'll be more or less that amount.
Councillor Barnett, followed by councillor Williams.
Just looking at the graphs of the impact on rates, for Points Road, Summerhill and West Earton, page 5051, which are all effectively going to be using the same water scheme. Points Road is sort of, with the stimulus funding, is hanging around the 1,000 mark. Summerhill goes up to 1,400 and keeps going up to around 1,400, and West Earton stays pretty stable on around 900. Why is Summerhill so disproportionately different, and why is it continually increasing compared to the other schemes who've received some benefit from the stimulus funding?
Well, probably a couple of points. The benefit it gets from the stimulus funding is exactly the same as for West Eden, which is the gap between the two lines. In terms of why is Summerhill increasing, which is from about years 3 to 6-ish, that would, I don't know the exact project that would be triggering that, but that's outside of anything to do with this. So I guess that is one point about this, is that we can't address all schemes with high rates completely with this project. That's probably a very good question to cover in the LTP, because that's what we're looking at, all schemes for the 10-year profile and beyond. But
I guess what is the feedback from the Summerhill Advisory Group, from the West Eden Summerhill Advisory Group about these figures? Have they given feedback about these figures as yet, and are they likely to accept these figures?
Well, the last time we worked with them, which was before going to Points Road, they had a recommendation on what size the contribution from Points Road to Summerhill and West Eden should be. Yes. And we've got a meeting booked in a couple of weeks to go back to them. We've since met with the Points Road Advisory Group, who've recommended a figure that's slightly different but similar, and then we're going to bring that back to the West Eden and Summerhill group, so we'll get that feedback.
So this is prior to the feedback from Summerhill West Eden?
We've had the first round of feedback from them, but we haven't had the second. The Points Road.
They haven't accepted this rating at the moment, including the Points Road addition.
They have recommended what's shown on that graph, the contribution that's on that graph has been recommended by West Eden and Summerhill. What hasn't happened is we then took that to Points Road, and then it has to go, because Points Road didn't say yes, we agree with that exact figure. We're going to go back to Summerhill and West Eden and say here's a slightly different figure.
So what happens, it's just a what if scenario,
Yeah.
you take it back and the Summerhill scheme people say, why is everybody else staying the same and we're going up? How is that fair when these people are getting a new service? How will that be responded to and how will we deal with that?
So there's a couple of points, I suppose. There is a small project for Summerhill and West Eden, each getting a small storage upgrade, but definitely not of the scale of Points Road. And I guess the only other point is that really the way to make all schemes have the same rate or a more similar rate is through a wider rating review, which is coming up. That's really the answer, I think. Yeah.
It's not the question I'm asking. The question is, isn't this looking like we're giving more to Points Road than we are to Summerhill?
I guess the point,
Yeah.
Colin, would be
Yeah.
that if that's the feeling of the Summerhill, and I understand Councillor Barnett's question, then that would be a measure that would come to the LTP.
Yes.
These are going to go into the draft LTP, so that could be submission points that could come from that advisory group.
Yep. Yes. Yep. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Mealings.
With regard to the Summerhill, with that Summerhill graph, I looked at that as well and thought that's quite, I can see where you're coming from, Kirsten. But when we were discussing that at the Points Road meeting the other night, did you not say that Summerhill's carrying a loan because they had a couple unsuccessful wells? So is that not, that's what I thought those figures were, why theirs are higher, because that scheme has a personal loan, if you will, of unsuccessful.
No.
Yep.
Yeah,
But had it maybe been smoothed, and is there a project in the works, or is this just the effect of smoothing from their capital loan?
Just as we've been talking about that, I've had a quick look at the Summerhill budget. So there is some works proposed in Year 8, capital works, which will have an impact on it. But I think probably one of the main reasons that it goes up and then comes back down again is because of what we were just talking about, the rate smoothing. So Summerhill has had rate smoothing undertaken on it. When we've prepared these graphs, we've just taken exactly what's in the budgets sheets as they are at the moment without any of the refinement or adjustment to them. So they were purely just to show the impact of the project and what it was going to do. So the purpose of the graph was to demonstrate that Summerhill was going to benefit by around about $20 per...
Yeah, about $50 per 2 unit. So
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful as part of the draft LTP that we give further consideration to that. I remember being part of this discussion when we were looking at the upgrade, and Councillor Mealings is exactly right. We'll be carrying some of that, but I think it would be, given the difference, it would be useful to have a further explore of that as part of the LTP.
yeah, and I can probably respond a little bit more just scrolling down. This exact question I think came up 3 years ago. There had been some smoothing applied to Summerhill, but what it effectively means is their rates now are slightly discounted, and then they have to make up for it in later years. So 3 years ago that was out about 6 years. Now it's only out by about 3 years.
So we can look at that as part of the
Yes.
LTP. That
Yep.
would be good. All right. Any further questions? Councillor Redmond.
Thanks, Colin. On diligent page 58, 5.2.13 under Tuahiwi, you say once a satisfactory number of agreements have been signed, the contracts can be awarded. What sort of number are we talking about? What is a satisfactory number?
I think it would have to be in the 80 to 90% kind of thing. Like if we've got 80% signed in the last, half of them, really good process, and we're just getting the paperwork sorted, it would be okay. But if we had, so that's the rough number, and we'd have to have not only that a good percentage signed, but a good enough indication about the rest, and maybe we could handle one or two that might be really tricky, but not 10 or that sort of thing.
Okay. Any further questions? Sorry, you have a question, Councillor Cleary?
That is correct. Correct. It's actually not a question, but I could make it sound like a question.
No, that's all right.
So
You have
just
a point.
going back to recommendation G, thanks to some speedy work from our chief executive, we can actually give you the figure. So it is instead of 2080, it is 2749. So that amended resolution that I had, we can scrap that and just make those edits to the table in G, and that would be a suitable resolution.
Okay, so does that transfer into, would transfer into the total amount as well, wouldn't it? So in both columns?
Yes, both columns.
2749.
Yeah.
So then wouldn't need the additional piece added to G, is that correct? So, Councillor Williams, you were signalling you were prepared to move. Are you happy with, as has been suggested, seconding? Councillor Doody? Councillor Williams?
No, I think we've all looked into this for a long, long period of time, and I think it's good for the whole community, so well done. Thank you.
Councillor Doody?
Yes, I'm just really speaking about the Points Road one. We're making progress there, so and that was really the last sticking one. So it's looking good, and I really congratulate the staff for all the hard work they've put into it. So thank you.
Any further speakers? Wish to respond? I'll put the recommendation, which is the piece that's circulated. So all those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Sorry. Yes, it is 2749. Yeah. Thanks, Adrian. Thank you, team. All right. So. Right, so we now come to 6.2, Kaiapoi stormwater and flooding improvements. So that's Kelly and Jared. Thank you. You were very quick in getting there.
Slot seats.
Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to obtain approval for the proposed funding approach for the shovel-ready Kaiapoi stormwater and flood improvements projects. So you'd be well aware that it has a total budget of 18.13 million, 9 million coming from the government's shovel-ready funding and 9.13 million from council budget. So that's existing budgets under the Kaiapoi urban drainage account. Staff have had a closer look at the funding arrangements for this, in particular the proposed Macintosh drain works, which actually have a benefit beyond the Kaiapoi urban drainage rating area. And it's proposed that we fund part of this from the district drainage account. We also propose to set up the Kaiapoi East-North-East Development Contribution Area. So that is an area just to the east of Sovereign Palms. And we already have an existing development contribution for sewer for that area, so it's effectively mirroring that and adding in drainage as well. So the net effect of that is that the Kaiapoi urban drainage rate will increase. Currently it's about $305 per property, and it will increase to about $452 per property by 2023-24. If we hadn't looked at recognising that some of the benefit for the Macintosh drain works is beyond the Kaiapoi urban area, then the Kaiapoi urban drainage rate would have increased more, potentially by about another $15 per property. In terms of the impact on the drainage rate, that will increase from about $16.85 per property up to $19.71, so a $2.86 increase. In terms of the recommendations, probably just a few key things to note. So while we've got a total budget of 18.13 million and we've given a a breakdown of what those projects are within Recommendation D. In Recommendation E, we're asking for the delegation to management team to actually, while not changing the overall total budget of this package of works, provide the delegation for budgets to be shuffled within projects within the total package. But also noting that we'll be providing regular reports back to council on progress, any risks, program financial status, so you're well aware of where we're at. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? No questions. I've got someone prepared to move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Atkinson, seconded by Councillor Blackie. Councillor Atkinson.
Well, very carefully, very quickly, I should say, carefully as well, I suppose, a lot of money. Look, we've canvassed it to and from in many different forms around here. This is a great thing for all of our community, and indeed our district. If when you pull the plug out and everything goes down it, someone has to catch it. And at the end of the bathtub is in Kaiapoi, so I'm very pleased to see that there are contributions across the district. We'll argue about what level that should be when we come to the district plan. I think should be a good thing to have a look at. Not the district plan, sorry, the LTP. We'll argue about
have a go on the
yeah, we
district
could
plan.
have a go there as well. But look, this is work that's going to have to be done and will be done in the future anyway. So it's bringing it forward, and yes, it does put pressure on, but it's the most sensible thing to do in the stimulus package that's offered. So I hope you will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Blackie.
Yeah, an excellent report, guys, and I'm glad to see that you've been thinking into the future with the Macintosh drain concept, because that's going to come up in the next couple of years. So well done.
Any further speakers? Rather reply, Councillor Atkinson. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, aye. Contrary, declare that carried. CEO, did you have something you wish to
Yeah, the speed of the maths before has created a slight point, which I think we could fix at the LTP, but with your indulgence, we could fix now. About that DC for Ayrton, the total value was correct at 669, but Colin made reference to the fact that that was for 2 units, and this schedule is for just 1 unit, so we should divide it in half, and if that were the case, that would make the number 2,415 rather than 2,749, which is better from a punter's point of view, but so either with your indulgence we could amend that now, or we just deal with it at the LTP.
Well, by agreement, are we all happy with that? So, Adrian, are you happy to just to adjust the minutes to... Hey, what's that? 2,415. Do we need to resolve that, Jim?
No, look, if
everyone's by agreement...
If you're around the table are happy with
Yeah.
it, it would be easier from Adrian's point of view just to amend that number.
Is there anyone opposed to that? All right, consider that amended.
Apologies.
That's okay. All right. So let's get back onto the agenda. That's part 2. All right, so I have no reports under regeneration. Just next year, regeneration will actually, we're proposing that will probably be removed from as a reported item unless there's items that come up, but there hasn't been for some time. But from next year on, that'll just move from the agenda. Just to let you know that. Reports. So we come now to 8.1, which is David and Rob, pages 159 to 179, proposed easements and Terrace Road Cust. Thank you. You leading, David? Welcome to our table.
Afternoon. Yes, it is going afternoon all. I suppose after all some of the numbers we just heard about, this is pretty low numbers.
Don't mean that won't engender a lot of debate.
Oh, I was hoping it might
Not
just-
saying it will this time, but we'll just never know.
Yeah, you never know. No, you never know. No, this is fairly straightforward. A private owner has made application for an easement for right-of-way and telecommunications and other bits and pieces across what is currently or what was a gravel reserve in the back of Cust. Fairly straightforward application. It's a question of council approval is required. The applicant is paying all our costs, including a compensation payment of $6,000 to the council, which, even though it may be 3 years old, it's still fairly current in relation to where the market may be for this sort of transaction. They had a valuation of their own at $1,000, and my view was that it was totally inadequate. It was founded on the wrong premise. So as far as I was concerned, it wasn't acceptable, and we told them so. In fact, they came with the $6,000 finally, so that's fine. So it's up to the council. Happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Any questions? Councillor Redmond, followed by Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. From looking at the aerial photograph, the reserve adjacent to the terrace seems to be occupied by the Giles folk at the moment, from looking at the aerial photograph. Do they have a licence to occupy, and has any consideration been given to disposing of that portion of the reserve when they're going to be doing some subdividing work with their own subdivision?
I'll do the second question first. With preliminary discussions we currently have a licence to occupy to one of the adjoining owners for the land on the eastern side of the bend on Terrace Road. He's got a 5-year licence on the basis that the ground was fairly rough, actually, overgrown, starting to get overgrown with broom and gorse. Preliminary discussions with him was that he was fairly non-committal at the time when we raised the question of a potential sale. However, since that time, with the disposal and acquisition policy being developed by the council, those situations would have changed. Back when I last discussed this with the individual concerned would have been back in about February. We hadn't really got that policy underway. It's a standard question we raise nowadays and to get some interest, if there is any, in that location. The second part, I'm not quite sure exactly where you're referring to, Councillor.
This bit through here.
Of the strip, the actual strip between the boundary and the road. Along Terrace Road. Yeah, it goes from on the eastern end of around about 35 metres down the far end to nothing on the western end, and it tapers right down. I think you would find there's a bit of adverse occupation, but these things happen in the rural locations.
So in short, no, there isn't a licence on that.
No, right. No. I mean that's a possibility. I mean we could go down that line if needed, but possibly not needed.
And just to further answer your question, and I think Councillor Stewart as well had raised a similar question earlier, which we've responded to. The origin of this went back about 4 or 5 years when the first inquiry occurred, and I recall, and I may stand corrected, that Gary did have a look at the prospect of offering it to sell to them. I don't believe they were overly interested at the time, but also on top of that, the costs of releasing the property from the reserve status and the timelines around that were reasonably significant. So in isolation, that little strip didn't seem to make sense from an economic perspective. If in future years the adjoining owner to the east that is currently leasing or has a licence over the larger block, if both parties, or in fact what might in the future be 3 or 4 parties, were interested, the costs of releasing the property or revoking the reserve status relative to the disposal revenue might start to make a little bit more sense. But at the moment we're probably looking somewhere in the order of 12 to 18 months to work through the process, and in the order of 15 to 20,000 for the costs associated with removing the reserve status and going through the investigations.
Just to follow up, are we going to look at a licence to occupy then in future for that wedge-shaped area to the south of Terrace Road? Once the easement is granted, I can't see them having any great incentive to want to buy something they're already occupying.
Yeah, correct. I think that any sale would be a discussion for the future. Although there's benefit, I would have thought, for them or the individual owners at the time to actually do something when that may occur. And yeah, point raised is a fair comment in relation to getting a licence to occupy. I mean, that could be a good way to manage the rest of the balance of the land anyway, or that sliver. Yeah, correct.
Councillor
We
Stewart.
can follow that through.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I emailed Rob over this because it came up, as he rightly says, several years ago when this subdivision was first considered. The question being, that is a long, weedy, infested depression. Can we not give it to that landowner because it is absolutely redundant land? I don't see that there is a value. It's full of weeds and it is actually goes down like that.
So, question.
So the question, as I said, can we not give it to that landowner? It is problematic in any shape or form, and to expect someone to buy it,
Yep. Well,
can we give it
you're
to
getting
them?
into debate there, but you've made your point.
Yeah,
Start to-
Well, can we give it to them?
Yeah, yes, the council could determine to actually give that away. However, there is a cost associated with that, up to $15,000 to $20,000. So that is the problem, because as soon as we do a survey, there's costs involved, there's legal fees, there's all the other bits and pieces. We've got to get the reserve status removed, and that takes time and effort to do that. I mean, the contract could say no consideration with the purchasers being responsible for the costs. And that's the way this agreement's worked, on the basis that the Gillies would be paying all the costs associated, including staff time, to actually get the easement granted if that's what the council determined. But point taken, of course.
Councillor Barnett.
Just further to that, the whole reserve area up there is absolutely covered in gorse and broom, and it's absolutely just a disgrace to council, quite frankly. Why aren't we doing something with that land to actually either A, bring it to a non-noxious weed standard, or B, getting rid of it so that we can actually have someone make use of it and look after it? Wouldn't that make sense?
Well, as I say, there is a licence to occupy on the eastern portion of that block, because the adjoining owner, he had a view exactly like yourself, that it's looking untidy, it's looking out of control, there's broom and gorse, and last time I was talking to him would have been about 3 months ago. He's done all the spraying that he needed to do, so that will come into control. He proposes to plant out natives, something like up to 4,000 square metres in natives, and the rest of it will then just be grazed. Yep. I mean, he's a farmer from way back. Yeah. Yes. So he's tidying it up. It will be tidied. He seems a responsible landlord.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah. By doing this, does that make it that bit of land just about impossible to sell later on to anybody else? That if anything happens on that area, that block?
No, I don't believe so. It would be sold subject to that. If we sold the whole block as one, as Rob just mentioned before, if we did decide to sell the part of the sliver off to the immediate adjoining owners, that would just come with it. And it could be that if they purchased a slice of the sliver, it could be that easement gets extinguished anyway at that point.
So what I mainly mean is this easement's forever.
Yes.
Can you not put a timeline on an easement in case something changes in years to come?
You could do, but it's very unusual that actually happens.
Okay, further questions? Someone prepared to move? Councillor Atkinson, the recommendation?
Yes.
Someone prepared to second? Councillor Bryan? Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, look, I'm very comfortable with this happening. I mean, everybody's questions around the untidiness and the piece of land, it's exactly what we set up the committee that we have to have a look at land disposals or acquisitions. That's exactly why we're forming a policy and exactly what we're doing. So the questions raised will be put and dealt with as that policy becomes to fruition. this is a piece of land which requires something done to it now, and like most of the stuff we do around this table, when we're in the here and now, we can't do much about it. We either have to be reactive or proactive. This is about being proactive for a property owner, and we need to get on and do that while the other committee actually gets the policy right, so we can be proactive again in either acquisition or disposal.
Councillor Bryan, do you wish to speak? Any further speakers? Councillor Stewart?
Yes, I'm really dissatisfied with this, and I can't think of a recommendation or amendment that would address the fact that we have an opportunity here to get rid of what is a ridiculous piece of long sliver of land that has been problematic for a long time, and bearing in mind that you've got a deal on the eastern end of this, granting this easement is not going to make it at all any way attractive to the subdivider to negotiate with the council to take ownership of that sliver. So we're going to be stuck with it, and asking people in hindsight to pay for it when they've got no need now and the opportunity to remedy a situation where this land goes into another ownership is going to be lost, in my view, forever. So bearing in mind that, as I've said, I can't think of something about, well, question. Delegates Chief Executive Property Manager to negotiate further agreement to determine the nature and specification of the physical work. That isn't extensive enough to do, to include that sliver of land, because, is it? Question? No. So I can't think of, in the short time, a way of including that sliver of land, and it isn't a straight bit of land or a flat bit of land. It is like that, and it's full of noxious weeds. It will remain so. We're giving an easement across it. There will be no interest from the subdivider or adjoining landowners to come to the party about buying it. So in this instance, I just have to vote against this. I think it's an opportunity, unfortunately, lost forever.
Councillor Barnett?
Yes, I take the point on board about the fact that if this was done a few years ago, perhaps a wider look at it could have been done, but the Reserves Act does constrain us an awful lot. So unfortunately we haven't got the time, because we have to give them an answer, and that's fair, and it's not fair to, I mean, I would have loved to have gone to them and said, look, $15,000 and you can keep it, and we've just got to get through the reserve designation. But that should have been done 2 years ago. So those sort of opportunities, it will be good to keep an eye out for them, because this is a redundant piece of land. It's a difficult piece. Council isn't maintaining it, and it doesn't actually add any value to the road. So therefore, or the drainage or anything. So it's actually, I take Councillor Stewart's points on this. However, you can't do things in hindsight, and you've got to move forward. So in this respect, the recommendation is right, but I do encourage property and subdivision team to look at these opportunities. If this makes sense for the community, let's get on and get it done. These sort of subdivisions take time. We may have the time, and it may actually work out that if they're going to spend $6,000 on an easement, they might have spent $15,000 to get the whole piece of land and make it easy. So I just encourage you to look for that for future opportunities. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Right of reply, Councillor Atkinson.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'd just really like to reiterate that the policy we're putting together is for land disposal or acquisition. It is not about purchase or selling. It is about all of those things. It may be that group comes up with the disposal of this land by the way of giving it away to this property owner. We haven't made that decision yet, because the policy hasn't even come across this table. So until it does, we need to do what it is necessary to make this work for the property owner today, looking forward to the future of that policy either be acquisition or disposal.
Okay, thank you. So we come to the recommendation now. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? No. So you're no. So there's 2 no's. Is that right? Yep. I'll declare that carried. Do you wish your votes recorded? just Councillor Stewart wishes if I recorded. All right. I think you spoke too soon, David, about it being straightforward. All right. 8.2, pages 180 to 186. Budget. Excuse me, members. Excuse me. Can we have silence, please? Thank you. So, budget considerations for Kaiapoi Park and Ride, and that's Sean. But maybe it's Jared.
So, look, the purpose of this report is to align budget with expenditure into the current financial year. So, we've had a provision of $4 million overall for Park and Ride that's been sitting in the long-term plan. During this current financial year, as you'll be aware, we've been accelerating the program of implementing the Park and Ride following the decision by the council as we landed on the final version of the annual plan to proceed with this work. So look, the actual expenditure in Rangiora has largely aligned with what was within the budget, and this report requests an additional $24,000 be brought forward into the current financial year to allow for us to complete the works we've got in Rangiora. And the more substantial reason for this report is recommendation B, which is asking for $227,000 to be brought forward for Kaiapoi. So as you'll recall, the work in Kaiapoi includes the car parking facility that's under construction at the moment, adjacent to the New World site, as well as the project that we've got for Keeley's just to the south of Tram Road. So I don't think I need to go into this in any more detail. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Barnett, followed by Councillor Williams.
Jared, just looking in the section 6 implications and risk financial implications, it talks about this being within the overall budget, but it doesn't mention any impact, short-term impact on rates. Are you able to give us any, will that make a difference for rates going forward?
Yes, it will. I can't tell you the exact figure off the top of my head. So overall, it won't, because by the time we implement all of the expenditure that's signalled in the LTP, but when this work is capitalised at the end of the financial year, there'll be an additional. There will be an additional. Just let me do the numbers quickly. An additional about 300,000 of capital work that we're capitalising, and that will have a flow-on effect in terms of our loan funding, as well as our depreciation of those assets. I can't just give you an exact figure off the top of my head, but the answer is yes, it will.
Just supplementary to that, could I please ask that when your staff do something like this, do a pull forward, that they please put that rate implication in the section 6 for us?
Yes, yeah, and we normally do that, so yes, we should have done that.
Do you have something you wish to add, did you? Okay. Councillor Williams?
For the Rangiora side of one, if we took the bike shelters or cages out of it, which are quite expensive, would that make a difference? Because when we originally were asking about the bike cages, we were basically told that people would be leaving their expensive bikes there and going away on the bus. And since then, I've been to meetings and found out the buses now have got the carriers on the front of the buses, and they'll take their expensive bikes to where they get dropped off at the bus exchange, and then they'll bike to work. So I'm really concerned whether we need to spend this money on these expensive cages for these bikes when they may not be going to be used. Would that, what sort of values we're looking at there?
I suppose, had we been aware of this earlier, I think the shorter answer would have been yes. and perhaps Don Young will actually have an idea of whether we've committed, but I expect we will have committed to the lion's share of that cost. So I'll be surprised if we haven't already ordered the manufacture of those bike cages. So yeah, Don's nodding. So that opportunity does not exist. But just further to that question, the bike racks on the front of the bus, they are one option. So some people do use those. But we don't see whether it's a bike rack on the bus or a cage as being mutually exclusive. Some customers will be quite happy to leave their bike in Rangiora and go into town, but other people might need to continue their journey on their bike when they get off the bus. So this actually gives them some more options. So overall, we think to deliver the kind of facility that we're trying to, it does give more options for people, and as I said, look, we've already committed to that at this stage anyway.
Okay. Other questions? Yours is answered, Councillor Ward? Yes. Thank you. You'd like to ask a question? Yes?
No, but it's been answered by Gerard, my question.
Yes.
So if I could move, then it would be good.
Oh, so you're signaling you'd like to move the recommendation. Okay, I'll just check there's any other questions. So you're prepared to move 8.2 A to J, Councillor Ward, seconded by Councillor Bryan. Councillor Ward.
Thank you. I agree that we need to keep both options there, and we need to keep the bike stands available there for people. A lot of people travel into Christchurch and then walk to work from there, and so we need to have both options available. So I'm very pleased with what's happening, and well done. So it has my full support.
Councillor Bryan. I'll just add my support to the recommendation. I'm really pleased to see the work that's been completed here, and thank the staff for all that's been done to bring this about. This is a very important part of our partnership agreement with Greater Christchurch, that we have Park and Ride in place as part of the arrangements for the new Northern Corridor, and some of us had that opportunity to go and have a look through along the corridor a few weeks ago, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic and be a real game changer for our district. But part of those discussions was around having Park and Ride and express buses in the high occupancy lane, and I won't traverse that because we've been over that for some time, but an important part of that is making sure that we have parking arrangements there and for buses to be able to access those, so that journey will work well in partnership. A lot of excitement around the town, actually. I've been picking up from people who, particularly in Kaiapoi, are really pleased to see that there will also be parking options included there near the New World. And also informed today that discussions are progressing well with the Motor Caravan Association, so that's encouraging. There's a lot of excitement about that potential as well in the town, because they'd like to see it, because when the Motor Caravan Association are there, they also bring added investment into the district, particularly our restaurants, our supermarkets. I think it's something like $140 someone quoted to me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was around that sum. So that's if that can get over the line, that'll be just fantastic. So I'm supportive of the budget and very thankful to the work. Particularly, I know Sean's been putting a lot of time into it too. I think he's done a really good job of getting us in a space that we can make sure that our commitment is honoured. Thank you.
Well, I think you've covered most of what I was going to say, really, about the Greater Christchurch Partnership. It is an important part of that, and discussions have gone around that for a long time now. So it is an important piece to the puzzle. And I think that's the biggest thing that we have to think about this whole recommendation and what's happening here, is it's a piece in the puzzle. And if we're going to get people onto public transport, we have to keep building the puzzle until such time as we fill it in. And this is a very, very important. This is the corner pieces which will help you fill the centre in. So I think this is well worthwhile, and hope you will support it.
Yeah,
While I will be supporting this, I'm just very disappointed about words like overspends and not being given the full information originally about these gold-plated bike stands. At that stage, I'd imagine everybody should have been told about the buses do have facilities on and take these expensive bikes into their works and they carry on, because that's the type of bike people will be carrying on further. So just a wee bit disappointed about us not getting the full information before I originally was told about these bike racks and all that. The other councils, I understand, are nowhere near as flash as this system, and I actually wonder whether it was a good spend or not, and I'm only talking about the bike racks at this stage.
Just on what Councillor Williams is raising, my understanding, and Mr Palmer, you may be able to help me here, that when ECAN came to us with the bus routes and so on, they also gave us the details that the buses had bike racks on the front of them and been equipped with those for some time. Is my recollection correct there?
Well, my recollection is that there have been bike racks on the front of buses for a long time, so I imagine that is the case, yes.
I'd just like to say that I think that, this is coming along nicely. It is, as the Mayor and Deputy Mayor have said, a very important piece to the puzzle in what is asked of us, of the Greater Christchurch Partnership. As for there being bike racks and whatnot, yes, that is something that has always, to my knowledge, been on buses, but people choose whether or not they want to use those or put a pram on them or whatnot. So what this does, what we are giving people is as many options as possible to make it as attractive as possible to get them onto it, and by giving them a comprehensive range of options, whether they take their bike, they leave their bike there, which end of their journey, one or both, they want to use a bike. This gives people a lot of latitude to work out what works best for them, which is all going to be positive in wooing people onto using this service. So I say good on you, carry on, gold-plated bike boxes and all. And hopefully we'll see some good use, some good uptake, because I have heard a lot of people also looking forward to this service and the other options that are going to be open whenever the Northern Corridor opens. So well done, thank you. Mine is, I just want clarifying with these bike racks, places for, is there anywhere where they can stand out of the rain? The people going on the shelter attached with them?
Yes, there will be a bus shelter at each of the park and ride sites that we're planning. There'll be a smallish shelter, but just a typical bus shelter.
Sure, we're actually debating on paper now.
Oh,
no. Feel free to join us if you'd like.
Are those shelters also, are they going to be on top of this price, or are they included in on the price?
By this price, they are included in the budget that is presented to you today. They will be allowed for in that budget. They are separate from the bike shelters portion of the budget.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do have concerns as to the cost of these proposals. We are looking at a sort of mode shift of transport to get people to use public transport. That's really pressure in my mind coming from Wellington. However, I agree that if we don't do it, we'll never know, and I think the concept is excellent. I just hope that people will use it, and I think it's a matter of building it and they will come. Well, I sincerely hope they do come, otherwise we've spent quite a lot of money on something that won't have a lot of use. So I'm optimistic, and it is one of the cornerstones of changing people's ways of getting about, and sometimes called a fossil by my grandchildren for relying on motor vehicles. This is a big change for me, but if we can get people to use this sort of system, then I'm certainly supportive of it. My only reservation is the cost, and we don't know what sort of uptake there'll be.
I think it's really important to know when we talk about the cost, we've already passed this cost. We're, as a council together, so that we're not debating the cost today, we're actually debating whether we bring it forward. And so the only real question is how much impact is it going to have on rates earlier than what we expected, which was the question we were asking. However, I'm satisfied that the quantum we're looking at is not too significant, and it's very, very important to get this project across the line. We have a responsibility as part of the Greater Christchurch Partnership. We have a responsibility to our community who are expecting this type of mode shift to be available to them. So I have absolute no hesitation in supporting it.
I'm just very pleased, and like Councillor Redmond, I hope that people will take up this opportunity and will use it, and then we'll all know that it's all been worthwhile, and maybe it will grow very quickly. I'm sure it will.
We're running a bit ahead of time, which is good, but now I've said that, we'll probably be behind. Don, actually, if you could remain, we'll take your paper now if you like. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jared. Jared, you can remain there as well if you want to. Don't have to. So we come to 9.2, pages 271 to 294. Tab 12. So it's Flexon Road upgrade. So, Don, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As the Council will be well aware, we've discussed this on a number of occasions around this table and around other tables. And unfortunately, due to the timing of this exercise, you'll also note through the recommendations that this project is already out for tender. That was I suppose, a calculated risk that the staff felt comfortable in taking, given that there had been quite a lot of conversation leading to this point, and we'd also engaged with the Mayor and the Transportation Portfolio Holder and the Chair of the Local Community Board before going down this track. We also have the endorsement of the Rangiora Advisory Community Board. I can also pass on now verbally that Aaron has been around the businesses yesterday, and generally, without fail, they are supportive of the change in direction. For them, the cycleway was always a bit more of an impediment than a benefit. Now I know there's another group of residents and ratepayers who will hold differing views, but from the business's perspective, they were quite pleased to see it gone. They were concerned about the impacts that it was then leading to in trying to fit it in. We have had one of the local businesses who has expressed quite strong concern about the inclusion of the parking, and has expressed on a number of occasions that they didn't wish parking, on-street parking, to remain. We are drafting a reply to that. It hasn't yet gone, but it will be along the lines of that it is a balancing issue, that while we can understand the access and the safety issues raised with regard to the parking, they were counterbalanced both from a staff point of view and also from a political point of view with the need to provide on-street parking to support the local businesses. So that's just to make sure you have a full and complete understanding of the feedback we're receiving to date. As I say, the work is currently out for tender. It'll be closing in a week or two. We're still on track to award before Christmas, and this work should be underway early in the new year, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Young? You have a question, Councillor Ward?
With the increased parking that's being allowed, has there been consideration so that any large trucks exiting and entering off the road won't be impeded by parked cars going in and out of their addresses?
So just to be clear, so everybody's on the understanding, when we say the increased parking, it was increased from an earlier proposal, but it is still less than the current parking. So we're not providing more parking than is down there now. We're providing less, but we are providing more than we were in the earlier versions of the plan. With regard to the comment you've raised, there will be no additional parking on the western side of the road, which is mostly where the large trucks and the large big box businesses, etc., are coming and going from. The exception to that is, you will note in here that the Rangiora Ashley Community Board has requested that we consider leaving out a portion of the curbing at the northern end on the western side, opposite McDonald's virtually, which would potentially allow some degree of usage in that area. That decision is yet to be made. We're still working our way through that. With regard to the eastern side, we're quite comfortable that the parking restrictions and the site restrictions have carefully considered site and access matters to make sure those accesses will be safe to exit and enter.
Okay, any further questions? I'm happy to move from the chair. You're going to second that, Councillor Williams. So 9.2. Look, can I firstly say thank you to Fraser, and I've attended a number of the public meetings that were held on site, including a meeting with some concerned business owners. I really appreciate the work that both Fraser and Don have done to consider carefully the concerns that are raised. We're never going to please everyone when we come to do works like this, but I think the critical aspect was when the safety audit was undertaken, there was no way we could achieve all in the width that we had on this road, and unless we'd have looked seriously at piping, which was just going to the cost, not only the cost but also capacity issues along there, which is required in the event if there is a stormwater event. That was one of the concerns around. It's just not practical to look at piping that. So if we had been able to have looked at that, we had, I think it was an extra 2.7 million. That was a conservative estimate to do that work. We perhaps could have been able to achieve some of those things. I'm disappointed there won't be a formed cycleway down there, I really am. But Councillor Barnett did ask at the community board when we were sitting there that alternatives be considered, and I understand staff are doing that, and I think that's a really good suggestion, because I think cycleway linkages are important in our district, particularly on a piece of road like this. So look forward to seeing what staff come back with. I also I think it's important that there is still car parking in this area, notwithstanding that particular submitter's perspective. There are a range of other businesses that really did want there to be car parking, and it would really have seriously impeded their activity, and they were talking about having to leave if that was the case, because it would have made it difficult for their particular business activity, and a number had moved there because there was that ability for parking outside their businesses, and fast food and other related activities do need a drop-off point there, so that was considered. I also support car parking remaining near the McDonald's area, so I hope staff can accommodate that. It is well used now. There's also a bus stop in that location currently. I think if we were to remove car parking and stop that, it would potentially affect the use of that bus stop. There is also a number of businesses down there that have high levels of cars, particularly the gym. There's a number of businesses that don't have quite the off-street parking that maybe they could have on site because of the size of coverage of buildings that they have on their particular sites. there is an option down there about looking at Ryan Place as well, which is underutilised now. I think would provide some potential extra capacity if required, and that was a suggestion that came up from a business owner, so I hope that we will look into that. But look, in general, and I say thanks to both Fraser and Don. It's been a difficult task, but I think you've landed on the best outcome that you can within the constraints that there are. So thank you for the work, and note that it's, as you mentioned, it's out to tender currently, and hopefully we get a good price through that process. It's been a long time waiting to get this particular area to a state that it needs to be, because it's been in a bad and poor condition for some time, so it's overdue. So look forward to seeing this project complete. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, I think it's the best scenario we can end up with. It's good. I personally are quite pleased we're not putting a cycle lane through there, mainly because of the safety reasons, but we are going to look at an alternative route there for cycles, but I just don't personally like cycles and trucks. They don't really mix. So so I think we're actually covering that by not having the cycle lane this time, but we will be looking at an alternative route, which there's been a couple proposed, and I think they're far safer for the cyclists, and will link the communities proper. But it is a main access way into Rangiora, and it's needed to be done for Yonk. So the sooner we get it, the better it will be. So it's cool.
Councillor Meetings?
Yeah, this has been a rather problematic stretch of road for quite some time, and there are a lot of competing interests for it. And I think that you've come to as good of a solution as possible, notwithstanding the fact that there are also some structural issues with what side of the road we could put it on, etc. So you've gotten to a good place. I would like to think that, as Councillor Williams has just alluded to, that we will have a cycle. It's a shame that there's not a shared path, but I would like to see, hopefully in the future, that we can work on a cycling path to connect up to the Passchendaele, so that cyclists can actually have a safe route through and into Rangiora in the most direct route, because at present it's quite a big detour if you want a safe cycling route into Rangiora from the south. But yeah, I take my hat off to you. This has been quite some journey, so may the force be with you on your continued journey.
Councillor Barnett, followed by Councillor Ward.
Yes, I particularly like the comment that you made, Don, about trying to fit a 20-metre carriageway into 16 metres. It's a little difficult, and so we certainly understood the juggles that you've had to do in this area, and we really appreciate the time that it's taken for you to bring the community with you and talk them through the issues that are actually happening. Just a point though, cyclists do have the right to use the road, so it doesn't matter if there are trucks. Everybody has the right to use any road in our district, and I would still expect there'll be some cyclists who just cycle quite happily down that road, and perhaps with the improved carriageway it'll be a more pleasant experience for them as well. However, obviously we had a submission from people coming from a Mandeville area, which is actually quite close, that they felt unsafe cycling down that road in its current state. So a diversion that's more family friendly, potentially linking with Passchendaele, is something that we can consider for the future. But it's imperative we get this project done. People have been asking it, as Councillor Melling said, for probably generations actually now. Certainly, I think we'll be really pleased to see the result and what a difference this will make. And I think it may solve some of the issues that we've already talked about.
Okay, Councillor Ward.
Just a question. I'm really thrilled that this is happening. Are we starting in January? We like to start in January. And what about Fernside Road Roundabout? Is that also starting in January? So is it going to impact very greatly on traffic going through there at that time, or was it better to get it all over and done with in one fell swoop?
Yes, it's a very good question, and the staff did give careful consideration to how these two projects should work together. we ended up concluding, well, if the truth be known, we had a very tight time frame, which was actually sort of driving both projects if we wanted to do them this year. But we did end up considering, even with that we were probably better off just biting it all at one time. So the road disruption will effectively go from the other side of the roundabout all the way through to Lineside Road. Yes, we are a little bit behind the time frame with regard to the roundabout. It is now intended to go to tender about this time next week, and we still, though, have a time frame for awarding that before Christmas, and again starting that because of the need for the 10 days. It'll probably be later in January that they get on site there. And the council will recall that they've delegated authority to award that contract, so we won't be trying to fit in with a council meeting there. But yes, there will be quite some disruption coming through Flaxton Road for 5 or 6 months, which is an unfortunate thing, but it is what it is.
Thank you.
Sorry, just adding to that, there will be two-way traffic through Flaxton. Urbanisation is a key part of the contract conditions, so they will be expected to manage the work retaining two-way traffic. Now that of course may be disrupted for half a day or whatever if there's a road crossing or some specific piece of work, but generally speaking there will be two-way traffic at all times on Flaxton, and we're also pulling together a similar plan as to how we can construct the roundabout of Flaxton Fernside and retain two-way traffic on that as well. So that is the goal.
Councillor Bryan?
Possibly a silly question. Contractors who may be bidding on the tender that's out now would know that potentially, that we're going to go out with the roundabout, that they would know that now?
It's actually a very good question, and the answer probably is not as much as we could have. We probably haven't signalled the intent for this one to come out, which we could potentially do. I could get that uploaded onto tender as an advance notice. We could do that today. That's a very good suggestion.
That's a good suggestion. Very good suggestion.
We did consider the merits of actually awarding them as one contract and letting them both catch up with each other, and we ended up not going with that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we're worried about a contractor's ability to do each part of it, and we felt giving the whole thing to one contractor would just increase that risk. And secondly, we felt the $1 million-ish or $1.5 million-ish is a good size for our good, strong local contractors. Turning it into a $3 million contract may well price some of our more reliable and local and trusted contractors out of that market, and so we ended up keeping them as separate.
Okay. Any further speakers? It's all been well said. I'm not going to respond to any of the points because it's all in agreement, really. So, which is good. So I'll put the recommendation A, B, and C. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Jared. All right. If we go back to now 8.3, which is the staff submission to reduce the impact of plastics on the environment. Mike, pages 187 to 196. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Did you say staff submission? It's going to be council submission.
Well, it says staff submission.
No,
Sorry, it does say. So it should be submission. Pardon me. We removed staff out of the summary agenda. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay. Look, the purpose of this report today is seeking council's approval of the draft submission that we've prepared on behalf of the council on reducing the impact of plastic on the environment. It's a very wordy title, moving away from hard to recycle and single-use items discussion document. So, it was a two-phase consultation, two separate proposals. Proposal one is to phase out hard to recycle plastics, and the other is the phasing out of single-use items. And the table on on page 188 does actually show that we're keeping essentially 1, 2s and 5s and wanting to phase out the rest. And there's also been the basis for this has been the Office of the Prime Minister's Chief Scientific Advisor from the report in December 2019, so there's a really strong basis to make this move. And of course we had a briefing on the 13th of October where the three of us introduced these what was going on here. So I think that's it. I assume everyone's able to have a look at it and look at the submission, so I'll just leave it at that. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Thanks, Mike. Councillor Williams?
It may not be relevant for a question you could answer with me. I noticed in Oxford this week, or it might have been last week, we had a recycling of some of the farmers' plastics and this week, plastics and all that, and we're accepting plastics that we can't recycle on our own transfer station. Do you know what the story, how we're going to get rid of that type of plastic? What's the story there, do you know? It may not be in your brief, but...
It has, as far as I'm aware, there was, about a year ago, there was that process to, there's a group of 6 hard to, whereas I've got a note of it somewhere in the report, it's part of the government's program already to start, there's plastic baling and packaging like that. Agricultural.
So the recent activity we had, that was more about hazardous waste and disposal of some of that plastic, rather than really a recycling initiative overall. I can understand how people get that conflicted message, but that was environmental in terms of trying to provide opportunities for the rural sector to dispose of hazardous waste.
Just that it, in the write-up, it was all going to be recycled, that was all. So it was a recycling exercise rather than going to Cape Valley. I just wondered, so it's all going to Cape Valley, that stuff, not...
Look, I don't know exactly where all of that material is going.
Councillor Meanings?
Through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps I could address that. Paul, what you're referring to is AgRecovery, and they, in amongst many of the things that they do with that agricultural plastic, is that they, I do believe, supply the likes of future posts and whatnot, and they are able to use a small amount of recycled plastic that they collect from farm containers and whatnot into other products, but of course they can't take the entire bulk of everything that we've got, and I think part of it is also just a product stewardship thing as well, with regard to like the silage wraps and things. Does that sound about right, guys? Yeah. Because there's Plasback and there's AgRecovery. There are 2 companies that do that. And because agricultural plastics, that soft plastic's one of the biggest problems that we've got, particularly in the rural area. But,
Thanks,
yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Meanings. Any other questions? So moved by Councillor Barnett, seconded by Councillor Meanings. Councillor Barnett.
Sorry if I snuck in there quickly, Councillor Mealings. No, this is a really, really critical submission to make, and I think the questions have been asked very, very well. It's really good to see the government actually putting some focus on this. It's been talked about for a long, long time, and it's really only going to work with national directive and with involving the manufacturers as well. Trying to fix it at the end of line is the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and the best thing to do would be to reduce the amount of plastic coming into the work stream. So I thoroughly support this submission. I thoroughly support the work that's being done by the Ministry for the Environment, and I hope the government will also start to look at some bigger, larger regional recycling schemes that we can actually get rid of the waste that we've got.
Thank you. Councillor Meanings?
Yeah, I'm just kind of echoing what Kirsten said there. I'm really pleased to see central government stepping up to the plate here. They've given us many directives to reduce waste and whatnot, and not a whole lot of tools to do it with. I'm pleased to see them actually moving in this direction, and also asking councils and businesses to submit on it, on what we think. And I think that our staff have put together a really good submission to the questions that have been put to them. And yeah, I tip my hat to you, Mr. O'Connell. Thank you. It's a great report.
Thank you. I just echo the comments that have been made by colleagues already, and it is a really important submission. I fully support it, so thanks, Mike, for the work that you've done on it. Out of interest, I actually popped into the Eco Central Open Day on Saturday and saw the MRF, well, it wasn't operating, but saw the resultant efforts from how the MRF operates in there, and they had videos in there, and there was about 1,000 people that attended on Saturday, which was really encouraging to see that level of interest. It was a stinking hot day, and a big open, but it was, but you do see the downstream effects of what gets in there and what shouldn't be there, and if there's anything government, and you're right, Councillor Barnett, the leadership does need to come from central government around product stewardship, all those other matters that they have responsibility for. So certainly hope that the leadership does follow through, because it will assist us. That we're having to do a huge amount of work now to re-educate people on the art of recycling and using their rubbish correctly. I'm not sure what our current non-compliance is, but the city were advising me on Saturday that they're still sitting on 42% non-compliance and what's going on in there. So it's a real, we've been, the lockdown period and the mixed messaging that happened through that period has set us back light years. It's costing us a lot of money, and I don't need to tell you all the work that we've been doing on letters through the Solid and Hazardous Waste Working Party, bin audits, and the education that needs to follow. So there's been quite a bit of effort in this space, but in general, going to government and getting some better tools, and for them to take a lead in this space will certainly be of great assistance. So thanks, Mike. Really support your submission. Councillor Redmond, followed by Councillor Doody.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to support the submission also. I think the key thing is that we're not doing away with all plastic. Modern society relies very strongly on plastics. And I was looking around this room, we've got plastic lights, plastic cover on the projector. There's plastic in the laptop, in the speaker system. There's plastic everywhere. Plastic pen, Councillor Williams. But it's a matter of redirecting the plastics, the common ones, the disposable ones, to the type which can actually be recycled or repurposed. The light fittings, my son's a plumber, and PVC pipes, they could go back to earthenware pipes, I suppose, if you do away with those, but I think they're not something that are disposed of on a regular basis. So I think it is good that the government is taking the lead, because when I buy a product in a plastic bottle, I generally may not have a choice whether it's a disposable bottle or not. I would like to think that whenever I purchase something in a plastic bottle, for example, that it will be recyclable. And the retailer really doesn't have a lot of control, it's the manufacturer. So I see this as a step in the right direction, and who knows, we may bring back glass milk bottles.
Councillor Redmond. Councillor Doody.
This all about this plastic and recycling things takes me right back to the 2001 Zone 5 and 6, where this was first brought up, and Kathy Keys tried very hard to get that to go forward, but it's like everything, it's words and not too much uptake, unfortunately. But we've got to seriously look at it now. We needed to seriously look at it way back then, but the government of the day wasn't very interested.
Further speakers? Councillor Barnett, right of reply?
Just a couple of points I pick up from the debate. Really would like to dispel that urban myth that council plastic is being recycled if it's clean and the correct type. And Councillor Redmond's quite right, but we do have some responsibility as a consumer. And so I go around and tell everybody the mantra, only buy 1, 2 and 5. Exactly. Easy to remember. If it's not 1, 2 and 5, don't buy it, if you could possibly avoid it. And the other thing is Councillor Doody mentioned the fact that it hasn't been done since 2001. It's talked about for a very long time. There's a huge cost, and the problem is who is going to pay, and that's the question that still hasn't been answered.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Barnett. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Thanks, Mike. So we now come to item 8.4. Vanessa Thompson, pages 197 to 255. Hi Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon everyone. The purpose of the report today is to seek your feedback on the draft waimakariri draft visitor marketing strategy, I should say. So the draft is still subject to tweaks from staff, Enterprise North Canterbury and the tourism consultant, as well as your feedback today, minor tweaks. It's important to note there's no additional funding requests that we're asking of Council to support this draft over the next, or the full strategy over the next 5 years. We've updated the name to Visitor Marketing Strategy rather than Visitor Strategy, just to try and contain the scope of it. So we've got limited resources in the next 5 years between Enterprise North Canterbury and Council. So we felt that renaming it and making it more streamlined sort of supports that contained scope. And that's probably the main things from me. So I'm happy to take any questions at this stage.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, oh, sorry, Councillor Barnett.
I guess the big question, Vanessa, is how are you going to implement this strategy with the very small budget that we currently have?
So it's based on the existing budget that ENC already get for promotions, and it'll be up to them primarily to decide how they distribute that within their activity. We've contained the actions accordingly, so the tourism consultant was well aware that the budget wasn't going to increase and work with ENC to contain those actions around promotions. So that's probably the main response around that.
Okay, Councillor Doody, followed by Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks very much for this. I'm just wondering, with when trying to do the marketing, whether you would be looking at what Marlborough did with their package that came out for everybody, the sites and places to go.
Actually, I'm not aware of that, so it's something I probably need to investigate.
Yeah.
But we can certainly look into it. Yeah.
It came out last week.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Redmond.
Just a correction, I think, Vanessa, on page 233 of Diligent. It refers to a council representative, Andrew Allen, from the Wood End Sefton Community Board. I thought it might be Andrea. Thank you.
Well spotted. Yeah. Councillor Blackie.
Yeah, picking up from Wendy's comments about, it's not our job to tell them how to do it, but I've noticed in the print media in the last month, magazines like Metropole and Avenues, Hiranui and Selwyn have been massively come and visit our, did you see that Selwyn said they've got 3 waterfalls, who knew, come and see our waterfalls. Nothing from Waimak. Can you just take that on board? I mean, we don't tell them how to do their job, but and maybe there isn't enough budget to do it. But I see there's been a dearth of stuff from us. Everyone else from Kaikoura to wherever is pouring it in there.
Just on that, actually, if I can just add a comment, we're looking at doing themed maps, which is a new option for us in the next 5 years, and that'll be working with the Tourism Advisory Group, which will include some stakeholder representatives, and that'll be looking at the district, what have we got to offer, so we might do, a whole themed map around boutique shopping in the district and then promote that heavily out. Externally, there might be all the walks in the district. It's just putting those experiences into groupings so that you sort of create that reason for people to come and visit, basically. I don't think we've done that in the past. It's sort of been quite independent how we approach that. So this is a much more targeted, focused way of doing it in the future. And our tourism consultant has certainly seen other towns overseas and in Australia do that approach and actually get quite a bit of promotion around that.
Simon?
With your indulgence, Mr Mayor,
whilst it's not in the recommendations, we've been through an iterative process with the stakeholder group and various other groups for refining this plan, noting that it is very much an operational plan for ENC and Council to implement a series of, as discussed just there. Would be interested in the Council's view on whether this needs to come back for a formal adoption for Council, whether Council through this process is happy for us to now go away and finalise and make any final changes such as names through the management team or Town Centre Implementation Working Group, and then finalise the document and implement it through that fashion.
So you're saying, Simon, you don't think we need F, which is noting the final version of the strategy will come back to the Council meeting on the 1st of December?
Yes, that's right. With the Council's indulgence, we're more than happy to bring it back in December, but we're not hearing through this process or any other form of process that the document needs to substantially change. The draft has been through a number of iterations, and we thought it might be one way of just saving Council a little bit of time. We can just move this on and adopt it in a different form.
Councillor Doody?
Thank you. I just feel in these circumstances at the moment that we need to move a bit quicker, because we have got communities and we've got businesses in our whole area that really need a shot of steam, so to say. And I just think everyone is hopping on this marketing thing. We're coming up to Christmas, holiday time. It is time that we sold our area and made it, wow, we would like to come here. You've got so many different things for people to look at. You know, you've got your holiday parks and Ashley Gorge with all that attraction, and the towns are all booming and buzzing. And I think it's an ideal time to promote.
Councillor Mealings?
So hello guys. I did read through your strategy. It's quite fascinating what you've come up with. It's good to see you kind of thinking about consolidating our offering, because as we've all seen over the years, for instance, Hurunui has got their Alpine Pacific Triangle concept. We could have a Kyoto Kitai kind of concept, because we have mountains, we have rivers, we have oceans and everything in between. Interestingly, yesterday, while I was flicking through, catching up on Facebook, an ad popped up for Hurunui to explore the Alpine Pacific Triangle. It's here. It's lovely, and it's a $450 per person offering, basically giving a whole range of options available on that triangle, something in Hurunui, or sorry, in Hamner, something in Kaikoura, something in Waipara, and we can do that too. I like your concept of your the road trips, and I do think too that we need to think more on that sort of adventure stuff. I didn't see a whole lot of mention of mountain biking in there, which there's some outstanding mountain biking trails that we have, and a lot of the other things were mentioned, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you come up with. I won't rehash everything you put in there, but yeah, I think you're off to a good start. But yeah, I don't think there was a question in there except for
I was sitting
my question. My question is that, yeah, can we perhaps maybe cash in on some hopefully organic Facebook marketing once we get our concepts consolidated and get that out there.
We can certainly pass that feedback on to ENC. It's just important to note that ENC will be delivering a lot of the promotions, so our area of focus is around infrastructure enhancements, influencing partners, but primarily the marketing side of it will sit with ENC. But we can certainly look at the Facebook marketing. I think that's something they're going to be all over as well as part of their promotional stuff. And our comms team have kindly said they will support where we can as well.
Thank you. Councillor Redmond? Did you? No. So the under F, perhaps a suggested way forward might be adopts the Waimakariri Visitor Marketing Strategy, 2025, noting minor changes will be made prior to publication, something along those lines. Well, how's that sound?
That would be perfect, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Yeah. So moved by Councillor Atkinson, seconded Councillor Ward. Councillor Atkinson.
Oh, look, this strategy is a good way forward. It's there's a lot of stuff in here that's already being done. I mean, we can all pick on different ways of how we should be marketing and how we shouldn't. I mean, people are right. I get the Sunday paper on Sundays, and then there is an escape version. I'm not sure how you're supposed to escape New Zealand, but however, it is an escape version. And there are people, there are travel agents out there at the moment visiting parts of our own country. I could put forward that we should be asking those particular people to come and visit our country and do the write-up, our part of the country and do the write-up. But, I mean, we can have all of those. I mean, I've been involved in ENC since its inception with this council, and it's done a very good job on marketing. It's picked the trends, and speaking of trends, is the perfect one. Some years they go to trends, some years they don't go to trends because it fits with their market, and other years it doesn't. So these guys are our experts. We ask them to do a job. This is a strategy we're asking them to stick by. So I think this is a very good way forward for them to make the decisions on our behalf and for us to trust them to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge all the work that's been undertaken in the last 3 or 4 months. You've both been very busy. We've had some great workshops, and I think it's set the foundation. And with the consultant that we've had some very good discussions, and I think that now we've got the base to move forward. And I think it must be mentioned that, you know, Enterprise North Canterbury are a great tool for us because they're independent and they're able to facilitate and get a lot more funding that we are able to give them, so that we can maximise the people on the ground to do the work for us. And so I really take my hat off to Heather and her team. They really add value to the marketing strategy for our district. So I'm very happy to support this, and I know that the groundwork's been done. We've worked very hard in the last few months, so now we can put it all into practice. Thank you.
Councillor Bartlett.
Yes, it was a pleasure to be involved in this project. It was very well run. I felt like the whole room was taken into consideration, and that the thoughts of the whole group have been encapsulated in the strategy very well, which can be very difficult to do with a diverse audience. This strategy for me, I've been through a few of these too, and this is quite different. This is actually quite a change from what we've had previously. Many of the elements that we deliver will be the same, but they're directed to a completely different market. And that's where it's going to be different. We have to direct to New Zealanders. Our market is still friends and family, but as you say, we've got a lot of competition out there. I note that there's an awful lot of camper vans. I've been on a couple of trips recently. There are just camper vans for miles, and that's a completely different market that we have to market to from our friends and family who come across the bridge from Christchurch. And I also note recently my father did a road trip from Geraldine in his mobile house that he has, and he mentions going from Kaikoura to Marlborough to Nelson. What about us, Dad? You know, we're somewhere in the middle. But I get the feeling that we also need not only the adventure activities, but we've really got to focus for seniors, because the seniors have the money, they spend the most money in our district, and they're out there travelling. And just to comment on the Facebook, Facebook is valuable if everybody shares it. So the main thing is you can put as many posts out there as you like, but it's up to us to share it with all our friends, our family, everyone that we know, and that's how you get great organic reach through Facebook, which is also a lot cheaper.
Just briefly, I agree the comments that have been made. I think the visitor marketing strategy, it was well overdue. Thank you for Vanessa and Simon for getting this, I guess, before us really and into a forum. And I was impressed at the time I had available to come along, the level of engagement and the new sort of people that were sitting there that hadn't previously engaged, and hoteliers and other people who were represented there. I was really interested that the new market for us actually is Auckland. They're our new Australia, effectively, and they're the people that are coming down here to visit. So it is rethinking it. Councillor Barnett's exactly right, and other comments around motorhomes. People are now getting out and experiencing our country, which is a great thing, really. So there is an opportunity. I note the comments have been made about Enterprise North Canterbury. That I think personally they're doing an excellent job. And yes, there's scope to always do change, but they are looking at that all the time. And around food is one area that they're looking at the moment, and around, I forget the exact type. There is a term. Food. There's a term that's been developed and trademarked at the moment, which is to look at the opportunity that we have here, in not only here in our district but in North Canterbury. So they are looking to be a lot more creative in that space and to look at opportunities that may exist for us and to take us into new markets, recognising that we do have some of the best food producers and wine in New Zealand within our region. So thanks for the work you've done. I think it's really good, and I certainly support it. Further speakers? Councillor Atkinson, do you want to reply?
Just to say that it is overdue. This 2015 was the last one that we did, and so it's well overdue that we did get it done. I think rather than new markets, these are very much old markets that we now need to focus on. Thank you, COVID. They've always been there, and it's always been a part of our district that we have tried to make sure that we capitalise on. Unfortunately, international travel got in the way of that many times because there was a percentage of people who went through here, and particularly with our own retailers, i.e. the moteliers and so on, were busy out chasing, we won't call it the big buck, but because it's the same buck, but they were chasing the international one as opposed to the local one. I think this is going to give us a chance to focus on local, and if we can get that right in this district, we can put in some tools, and one of those is Motorhome Association. I do note that on Monday they handed out their 100,000th gold ticket, or golden wings, to their 100,000th member. So that is a massive amount of caravans and camper vans that are certainly on the road and just belong to one organisation. So if our district can concentrate on the tools to get that, which is where I believe the strategy is heading by doing the local thing, we can get those tools set up. Hopefully by the time we get a bit of international travel and things are starting to happen again, we may be able to shift into that, but what will happen is we have the basic right.
Thank you. So with that, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Thanks, Simon and Vanessa. Okay, now come to item 8.5. So that's pages 256 to 261. Sarah's not here today, but I think I'll probably cover this, unless you want to, Mr. Palmer. So this is just around council portfolio amendments. So as I indicated at the start of the council term, I was keen to see how things were going 12 months on, and so thank you all for being part of sort of a review, really. And as part of that, it was good to hear how everything was travelling, and any any changes that you'd like to have seen in your portfolios. Some I've been able to make happen, others it's a bit more difficult around committee structures. So there wasn't many, as you'll have seen here, there's not many changes I've proposed, and some of them I just weren't able to achieve easily within making sure that the numbers work for you on respective committees. But you'll see in the recommendations where I've just, by agreement, Councillor Doody and Councillor Ward are just going to switch committees there, and also given her just around the with district plan load as well, with communication and customer service portfolio, a slight change there with Councillor Atkinson picking up the communications portfolio. It's also recognising that Councillor Atkinson's role around international relationships isn't as well, due to external issues, that's being there's not as much going on in that portfolio. And saying that though, Passchendaele and there is work going on in that particular committee. So And the other was just also recognising with Councillor Blackie that the regeneration portfolio kind of winding down in some aspects was to look at a slight change there. Now, despite what Ev says, I'm going to suggest something different because it didn't read how I would have liked that. So we're looking at F would read approves a new portfolio, land-based Indigenous reserves, including, in brackets, including river margins, and taking out ECAN in that. So it's recognising that that's an area Councillor Black is currently working in. I know there's a little bit of crossover with self and Councillor Stewart, and we'll work that, how that exactly works out. But there's, but Councillor Stewart does have quite a high load in her portfolio too, so it's a bit of balancing there. So there's no other changes proposed because I think actually by and large everything's working really well. I in the meetings I had with each of you, there was no concerns raised with me, and I've tried where I can to be able to make those changes that keeps everything balanced. All right, any questions? Did you wish to question Councillor Williams? Oh, you're going to move? So, sorry. What's that? Sorry. So it's a new title of new portfolio of land-based Indigenous reserves, including river margins. So he's not going to be native and Indigenous. Reserves. Just including river margins. So I'm sorry, I didn't see this as fully as I should have done beforehand, so my apologies for that. So it wasn't how it was intended to be worded, but anyway, I think we've clarified that sufficiently. Any further questions? Councillor Williams, you're prepared to move? Seconded by Councillor Redmond. Do you wish to speak to it? Councillor Redmond, any further speakers? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. All right, so we now move to item 10, 10.1, Health and Safety Report. Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Monthly report. No significant injuries or accidents that I think you should be concerned about. Just noted that the accommodation project is progressing well. Staff are coping with that well and being quite accommodating and supportive. The stage 1, which is upstairs in the service centre, our hope is that by the week before Christmas that that work will be completed, and that will enable stage 2 to occur, which is putting a lot of people back in upstairs, and then working on the downstairs, which will see our service centre front counter shift down to in front of the current chambers, and a lot of the staff that were in there will be in the chambers, so there'll be continuing musical chairs going on for the coming months, but there are no other matters within this report that I think I need to draw your attention to. As always, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Questions? Councillor Barr?
Mr. Palmer, I've noticed that a few staff actually seem to be absolutely loving their new accommodations and may not want to go back to where they were. How are we going to manage that in terms of some of the accommodations in the building we've known their limitations for some time, and the fact that they're now in quite nice accommodations?
Carefully, I think, is the answer. You're right.
Because it's improving their mental morale.
There are some who are certainly benefiting from some better spaces than we've had over the last months and years. That is true. I'm confident that the refurbished spaces will be equally as nice, if not better, than what they're temporarily occupying. You'll be aware that our IT related teams who are now in Durham Street, that's I'll call it a semi-permanent relocation. So that does has created the additional space that will then allow people, I won't say to spread out because people will spread out to the space that's available, but it will provide some opportunity for further growth and for that to be all accommodated. But I am pleased with the temporary accommodation and the way staff are dealing with. Probably the biggest issue we have is meeting room availability and the finding that you don't look at your diary close enough, and that's me confessing turning up in the wrong space and thinking, oh, there's nobody else here, why is that? And then trudging off to another venue. So so that has happened from time to time, but yeah, the way people are responding is really good, and hopefully we create some new work environments that they find equally appealing once they're back home again. And yeah. It was a similar experience to what happened in the late 90s. The council staff got scattered to the four winds, and those who went into their temporary accommodation, they developed their own particular culture, which can be a good thing, but actually can make them a little bit more insulated as well. So it's got advantages and disadvantages, but yes, very conscious of that issue you've raised.
Just a second question also, there's been some issues with IT connectivity in some of the different locations. Has there been a plan established to make sure that there is good IT connectivity in all the meeting spaces and all the areas that councillors also have to attend places so they can actually access the internet?
So that's about Wi-Fi connectivity predominantly for visitors into spaces, and you note that, and even in this...
Notably Durham Street and Pegasus Community Centre were the two we encountered that we had problems.
Durham Street, that's interesting. They've got really good fibre cable in there. They probably haven't thought about visitors. I'm not sure.
You can't connect over there on our computers. No, we had to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because they didn't. They obviously don't have a Wi-Fi set up there.
Okay.
Well, they probably didn't think they needed it.
Okay.
But so, and Pegasus.
Could that kind of
the other one you said,
Pegasus Community Centre, everyone could connect except me, so it's all my fault again. But you had trouble too. So it's just if we're sent to meeting spaces, we do need a basic level of connectivity for our gadgets generally. So
mine worked okay. So.
But just wondering if that could just be looked at to make sure it is working properly.
I'll take a note
Thank
of
you.
that.
Just for frustration, it's our mental well-being. It's affecting.
Okay.
Any other questions of on Philip? Sorry, Councillor Redmond. Oh, very good. Excellent. All right. So, no further questions. I'm prepared to move the report. Moved by Nikki, Councillor Mealings, seconded by Councillor Redmond. Councillor Mealings.
Nice to see that we haven't had any accidents of note, and that things are progressing well with the refurb, and hopefully we can lure them back to their new accommodations someday.
Thanks, Councillor Mealings. Councillor Redmond.
The only comment would be that the injuries appear to be of a very minor nature. A couple of near misses, one in the council chambers, I notice, and somebody falling down the stairwell at the back of Farmers. So that's something we must keep an eye out for. But no, it's a good report, and there don't appear to be any issues.
Any further speakers? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. I need to just go back to 9.1, pages 262 to 270. Thank you for the reminder, Adrian. Okay, so we've got a report here. Who's going to speak to that? It's from Nick. So, you happy to speak to that, Jim, or should we just? It's just a report back. It's been fairly well discussed. Yes. Is there any is there any questions on the report? So there's a recommendation. You prepared to move? Sorry, any questions? Firstly, moved Councillor Blackie, seconded Councillor Doody. Any discussion, Councillor? Further discussion? Yes. Councillor Barnett.
I very much wish to speak to this one as enforcement minister.
Can you? Sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to catch up with Mayor's fast tracking of this report.
I'm not trying to fast track it at all. I was just so if it, speaking to it's fine. I was just trying to keep speed up with our meeting. We've got a lot to get through. So.
Thank you. I would really like to ask this committee to please vote no, and I just want you to hear me out as to why. Just keeping your minds completely open, okay? It's no reflection. I really believe we should be voting no to adopting this bylaw. And it's absolutely no reflection on the initiators of and the intention of what they tried to do. They had concern from residents. They raised an issue. They discussed it with staff. They investigated. All of that is absolutely fine. They then took it to a panel, which is taking it to the community, and the panel tried really, really hard to work through the issues. The panel wasn't unanimous, so it shows that there were concerns over this bylaw. It was really tricky. And the submitters weren't actually submitting on what we're adopting today. They submitted on noise. They submitted on, what else was there, rubbish, compost. They submitted on hoardings and other caravans and other nuisance factors that they don't like seeing in their neighbourhood, which is absolutely fine and it's their right to submit. But the bylaw we're trying to adopt today, or looking at adopting today, is about long grass, right? And we didn't actually get any submissions on that. We've had some concerns, but we didn't get really hardly any submissions. It was on general nuisance. When regulations considers a request from someone, when they consider a complaint, the first thing that the Regulations Committee do is they look at what legislation can back them up. Because the Local Government Act gives us no power to actually enforce anything. It gives us no power to recover cost. It gives us no power to actually follow up any sort of enforcement except through the courts, which we generally don't do because it's incredibly expensive. And I can't see us following up a complaint about long grass through the courts. What happens now, we get a complaint from a ratepayer. They come to regulations. The staff deal with them. They already deal with them. They talk them through and they say, at the moment, all we can do is give you the address of the person and they can write them a letter. And I noted on Facebook yesterday, someone had done that in Pegasus. They had got the letter of the absentee owner of the section. They lived in Singapore. They wrote them a letter in Singapore, a nice letter asking if they could maintain their section. The letter came back from them saying, apologising for not maintaining the section, and they have maintained it ever since. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how civil relations are supposed to work. The definition of amenity is really, really hard. It's hard in a court of law. It's okay for one person, may not be okay for someone else. What we are doing with this bylaw is we are putting staff in the middle of this civil issue. We are putting staff and costing time, costing money, and we're also putting them as the barrier between two neighbours. We're actually putting staff in a situation of neighbour wars, which is really difficult. It's not a tool in their toolbox. It's giving them extra acrimonious work, and it's not necessary. It really sets a dangerous precedent. We are using bylaw mechanism to tackle a community issue. We have to give the message to our community. Council cannot fix every issue that upsets our community. We try, and we can lobby, and we can advocate, but we can't fix every issue that everyone brings to us. We all know this. This one is a covenant issue. So we need to encourage our community to find civil solutions. We need to encourage them. that if they have a neighbour dispute over property that's not maintained, it needs to be handled with their neighbour. If that doesn't work and there's some problems, that's when they go to their lawyer. Or if there's real acrimony, it escalates to the police. It's a civil dispute. It's not a council dispute. I'm asking you today, please don't take this council down that path. Please don't ask our staff to be involved in civil disputes, causing them more grief than what we currently face when we just have to give them an address. I ask you to save costs and staff time on what is a subjective issue that's going to be very hard to define in a court of law. In the bylaw we talked about the manner appropriate to the area and to encourage responsible management of property. We don't have to have a bylaw to encourage responsible management of property. So I'm asking you today to not put staff in that position, not put this council in this position, and to vote no to adopting this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to it now. As the initiator of the bylaw along with Councillor Williams, the reason this came about in the first place was because of complaints that we received around, originally around long grass. And there were situations and there are situations where there are neighbours against neighbours, and no two ways about it. If they were taking care of these sections, absentee landlords or owners, it wouldn't have been an issue. But in this instance, that's where it was happening both here in Rangiora, instances in Kaiapoi, and also instances in Pegasus. And so we did I worked with, because I was chair of DPNR at the time, and I worked with Mr. Harrison, and we found that rather than reinventing the wheel, there was a nuisance bylaw that the Auckland Council had developed. So we looked at that and the provisions of that, made some changes, and it was brought forward to the Council for its consideration. Council decided it would go out and consult, which it did. I went round to each of the community boards who all supported having this bylaw. Also went and talked to a number of community organisations who also were in support of it. It was originally to be just for long grass. It got extended when it went to our staff who also were supportive of seeing a bylaw developed, but they added there was a whole raft of things that were added in there. So in the end, I think what ended up happening with the panel was right, that it was confined to just long grass, because effectively that has been the main issue. It's right. Other organisations should be dealing with this. Fens, for instance, that's where the change happened. And I think it was an unintended consequence of the law that meant that the ability for our council was removed to respond to these matters when it transferred to Fens. Fens have no interest unless there's a direct fire risk. In this instance, and Councillor Barnett's right, we don't really want to have bylaws in place where we don't need them. Don't really necessarily, I think government don't want to put laws in place as well where they don't need to, but unfortunately there are instances where people need a bit of a stick in terms of, or there needs to be something in the toolbox in which our staff can then use to hopefully discourage behaviours. And there are a number of people in the community waiting for this bylaw to come about. My understanding from discussion with our staff is that they're supportive of having this bylaw here. I haven't heard anything to the contrary in that regard. I'm not seeing that, hopefully, that we would have to recover costs through the courts if we didn't have to. Hopefully common sense would prevail, but the test is there if we ever need to, that we could take that step. My personal view is that I'd hope that we wouldn't revert to using the courts, but that's the only mechanism that we have in place in which to really test it if we have to. I would hope it's in the toolbox as a way of discouraging behaviours, and ideally people take care of their sections. If you own a section, you should be taking care of it. Unfortunately, that doesn't occur, and there are a number of instances where we get involved because people see us as the last cab off the rank. So I would ask that you do support this. It's been through a proper process. It's had a hearing panel that have gone through it. It's had two goes at it now, and I think where it's got to is in best shape it can be, and I thank the work of the hearing panel that they've done. It's here before you today, and I'd ask you to adopt it. Further speakers. Councillor Atkinson, followed by Councillor
Well, I have
Williams.
a question. Councillor Barnett said it's a matter of covenants. It's not my understanding that Kaipoi and Rangiora have any covenants over any normal section would end all of those places. Pegasus may do for a short period of time until the owners are gone. Am I correct in that assumption that if places don't have covenant, then how can it be a matter of covenant?
I can't answer that question.
I think covenants usually have an expiry period for most of the urban areas, like in Rangiora and Kaipoi. They would be expired. Noting that the bylaw relates to undeveloped, it's not actually sections that are already built on, so it's undeveloped sections. So some of the others do have covenants, I can't answer whether they have covenants around the length of grass prior to building a dwelling on those houses, on those sections. I don't know. So theoretically it could be covenants can cover a very wide range of things on sections, so it's feasible, I imagine, to have a covenant for it. I don't know whether they're actually in place or not.
Did you wish to speak? Okay. Councillor Williams.
I actually don't think it's all about neighbours. Sometimes I've, up in Marlborough, for example, I'm driving past a section there and it's all grass and all that there. I get annoyed about other areas that are growing in areas. So, and what I'm trying to get at, because I'm getting a nasty, funny look from my colleague.
Excuse me, that's not necessary.
No, oh no, it's not necessary. I shouldn't get a funny look.
No, hold on. We're not going to get into this. Please just confine your comments to the debate, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, cool. But what I'm getting at is there's areas in our district not classed as neighbours are having an effect from it. Everybody has an effect because they've got awards for beautiful towns and all that drama coming around and all that drama. If we let sections get out of hand, and some of them do, it affects the whole of the community. I think we also should think about, staff was mentioned about enforcement of the projects. So I understand we employ staff specifically for enforcement, so that's their part of their jobs and their description. And if it had to go to the court scenario, we need to start getting a bit modern and don't have to start involving big expensive lawyers and solicitors and what have you. And it's probably time, if there's something here to set an example, we need to think about the small claims court situation, which is a minimal cost to get a major problem sorted out. So that's it.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I share a lot of the concerns that my colleague, Councillor Barnett, has raised about this bylaw, and having sat on the panel, they're even more pertinent as a person who heard all the arguments for and against. I'm relatively comfortable with where it's ended up, in that we've eliminated all the nuisances that were brought to us, in that they are covered essentially by every other piece of law that local government can enact, and there is seemingly the long grass remains as one that should have been picked up by fence perhaps, but isn't. So I am persuaded to vote for it, bearing in mind that on July the 31st, 2021, which is about 8 months down the track, we have an effectiveness review, and I am very keen to see a report on that in 8 months' time, and that will, I think, and should do for everybody else around this table, trigger whether in fact, after we look at the effectiveness review, whether the whole bylaw should be reviewed, and that is 8.2. This bylaw can be reviewed at any other time before the date of 2025 when it comes up for a 5-year at the discretion of the council. And I am going to be watching that, because I do agree that we have ended up as in fact a community problem, and that, you know, some people don't like the look of grass there in the urban area, and fair enough. But I do want to see that after all this effort, that this is an effective way of dealing with this. And if it isn't, then in fact, when I sat around on the panel, I would like to think that we have enough community care within our towns, that if there is a problem seen by a group of people, that in fact they can volunteer to approach the neighbour or the person and say, let's get together and mow your lawn or whatever. So I'm very keen to see the 8 months trial, and I consider it a trial, and that we have some really serious consideration then about whether this is the mechanism that's going to do the job for us. So thank you.
Okay, further speakers? Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Property maintenance bylaw is not a wide-ranging amenity bylaw. It's very specific. It relates to long grass. In my mind, the fire risk that long grass can cause in a community. Whether 200 centimetres, which I understand is the length of one of these, is the appropriate measure or not, well, the jury's out on that one. But it is a start, and I think it will be very infrequently used. In fact, I would be surprised if in the next 8 months it's probable. So we'll find that out when the review comes along. As the portfolio holder for regulation, no staff members have said to me they have any concerns about their safety or implementation of a bylaw. So whilst I do hear what Councillor Barnett and Councillor Stewart are saying, I'm prepared to give this bylaw a fair go. Thank you.
Further speakers? Councillor Becky, do you wish to exercise your right to reply?
Mr. Mayor, because it's been covered well in the last 10 minutes. Yes, it's been reduced down to a long grass bylaw, and that was deliberate because, as has been explained to you, everything else that we took out is covered by other statutes and other regulations. Yes, it's not perfect by any means, but the comment was made that this is a community issue, and it isn't the staff's job to fix community issues. It actually is at the end of the day, because you're dealing with unreasonable people. If we had a society of reasonable people, we wouldn't need this at all, and then a bit of conflict either. But we do, and we have, and so you need something. And yes, the bylaws, as we all know, have got no teeth. And that's good coming from a dentist. But and we see that all the time at Pegasus, where the hoons are ripping up our sand dunes in their buggies, and we can't do we can do very little about it, because it's the same thing. That's a separate issue. The fact that we cannot have a fine system backing a bylaw is a totally separate issue. So yep, we go with this in the meantime. Give it a trial run and see what happens.
Thank you, Councillor Becky. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, contrary. I declare that carried. Okay, and Councillor Barnett, which vote recorded. Okay, so I'm just going to look through these minutes, and then we'll break for afternoon tea. So first, we've got item 11, 11.1 to 11.6, moved by Councillor Becky, seconded. Oh, sorry, yes.
11.1, the Waimak Youth Council on page 307, it says that I was to set up a sustainability working group, which was news to me and probably news to Nikki as well.
I'm glad about that. Good on you.
that correction. Yes, but it's just, we'll just note that correction, but thank you. So you're prepared to move, Councillor Blackie, 11.1 to 11.6, seconded by Councillor Ward. Any discussion? All those in favour? Sorry, I was going to take all the minutes in one. Yep. So did you have a question? Oh, that's the next one. Sorry. Yep. Yes.
Sorry, on page 312 of that Youth Council thing as well is on page 312, it's the 25th of August, because we don't get these minutes. It just says, Nikki Mealings expressed concern around the spasmodic Wi-Fi connections in some rural areas. Broadband. Wi-Fi and broadband are two different things.
Okay,
Wi-Fi
so
is
maybe
in your house.
that's a matter we should take up at the next Youth Council meeting, but if you could note
Other
that,
than that, yeah.
Adrian.
But yeah, I was going to otherwise. Thank you very much, Al, for giving me my my group back. Thanks.
If we could put, Adrian, if we could just note that, and yeah. So with those corrections, that's moved. With those corrections, it's moved. Any other corrections? Moved and seconded. Sorry, not corrections, but noting of what the corrections might be for those committees to address. Items 11.1 to 11.6 moved and seconded. All those in favour, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Item 12, Community Board minutes for information. Did you have a question, Councillor Barnett?
Page 344 of the Kaiapoi Tuahiwi Community Board, I'm noting the report about the Ohoka Road Island Road intersection. I wanted to ask Mr Palmer if a report could be brought to Utilities and Roading about the traffic numbers and accidents happening at that intersection, and also perhaps an update on, we seem to have had a lot of recent crashes in the district. I just wondered when that next report on crashes is going to be brought, because this has been raised at councillor level as well as at board level.
So I see the reports was circulated to the committee for information. I don't recollect what the report includes, but circulating any updated data, any data we have is not a problem if providing we've got access to it. Yeah.
I was kind of hoping that we could get a report brought to Utilities and Roading, because I believe that this is a significant
Why don't
issue.
we just we can request that it be portfolio holders, Councillor Williams and myself. We had a discussion with Mr Cleary and with Joanne the other day, and one of those matters was this particular intersection. So it will be coming up as part of consideration of the roading program, because it has been identified by numbers concerned. Yeah, okay, but it is going to be coming up as part of our consideration of LTP. All right. Any other points? So there's any other questions? So there's a recommendation moved by Councillor Atkinson, seconded by Councillor Barnett. Any discussion? All those in favour, aye. Contrary, declare that carried. We deal with 13.1, which is just recommendation that information be received. Someone prepared to move that? Councillor Doody? Yeah, I knew you were. Yep. And moved, seconded by Councillor Ward. Any discussion? All those in favour, aye. Contrary, declare that carried. So, no correspondence. Item 15.1 is my diary. Is there any questions? Moved to Councillor Barnett, seconded by Councillor Doody. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour, aye. Contrary, declare that carried. I think at this point we've just, well, how are you feeling? Should we do the portfolio updates and then we can break for afternoon tea, then we go straight into committee? Is everyone okay with that? All right. Okay, 16.1 iwi relationships. I gave you it was a fairly good briefing last week around Mahi Tahi. Unfortunately, the Mahi Tahi meeting that was scheduled to happen today didn't occur, and I know there was a scheduling clash there with another council meeting, and Councillor Barnett did raise that yesterday. I know staff do their best to try and make sure that we do have meetings clear, but it's a bit tricky with all the meetings that are going on this time of year, but I note that there are interest of other colleagues that do want to go to those. The next meeting hopefully will occur, but there is a tangi, as my understanding is the reason for why that meeting was postponed. I went to a meeting with Ngāi Tuhuriri Kamatua last week, around 30 odd there. Yeah, it was a really interesting meeting to see iwi dynamics at work. And I was made, as we always are, made feel very welcome, but I certainly got told in no uncertain terms of some of the things that are priorities for them, including the footpath on the other side of the road from Bramley's to the Urapa. So I have asked Jared if that can be considered in terms of the costing. It's not giving any commitment for it to be undertaken, but I'd like to know myself what sort of work would be required, because it is asked at every meeting we go to, and I think we need some level of response or discussion, because I've been put on notice that I will be asked at every meeting about that, so that's fine. I've got a Runanga meeting scheduled for this Thursday, so with Jim and Simon. I think that's still going to happen, but we'll find out about that. Apart from that, just to acknowledge, as we have done already, but Dame Maraha was officially conferred on her last week, so it's a lovely honour for her, and there's going to be an appropriate recognition of that at the marae in December, so which we're to find out about in due course, but anyway, that's really nice that the local Runanga will recognise that. Happy to take any questions. Canterbury Water Management Strategy, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be as quick as I can. Yesterday we had a water zone, and there appears to be a move from Christchurch City for membership on all the water zone committees and the regional committee, which has caused quite a level of consternation. I've just been monitoring the email traffic this afternoon, and from what I understand, it was mentioned, and now it seems to have got a bit of legs, a few legs, and from what was said yesterday, Christchurch City may be asking for up to 5 members on the Christchurch West Melton Water Zone Committee. So I'm asking where that has come from, and I don't think we've had anything officially, but it's certainly out there and around, so and been instigated from either some Christchurch councillors or whatever.
You bring news, Councillor Stewart, that I have not heard before, so
well, I suspected as much,
not
but
aware of the matter.
anyway, it appears to, and it has, not unsurprisingly, got fairly much a thumbs down from the rest of the waimakariri zone committee members, but it would appear that the regional committee of ECAN is under review, and with the idea that council members I don't think it has any council members at the moment, or territorial authority members. There's a move for it, and that has been pushed back on. So anyway, that's for an item of interest. Yesterday we had Mike Bate talking once more on with pictures, areas of the Cam River where there is no weed, and he's convinced that there's spraying occurring. Last time he brought this up, which was last meeting, asked Sophie to go out with him and let's map them, and we're just working on that, so I would like to know where they are and whether there is anything that immediately strikes us that is going on there. He was also critical again. In fact, he's got old photos, but the same about the algae on Pines Beach, which he says is a result of our malfunctioning sewage outfall. Interestingly, yesterday, John Cook, who used to live down there,
and surfed for 25 years pre the 2006 outfall, said he waded through metre deep foam of various colours when he was a young person and is still here to tell the tale. So, one of the major positive things that it came out yesterday is, as you know, we've been through Land and Water and also through the Water Zone Committee asking ECAN to put in continuous monitoring of a whole range of water quality parameters on the Kaiapoi River, and they have undertaken now to do this, and I think the gear, which is some of this gear has not been installed anywhere in New Zealand before. It is going on the Kaiapoi River end of January, February. And speaking to Adrian Mera yesterday, he said perhaps after about a year there should be some data to give an idea of how degraded the the river is on that stretch, and from that try and craft some solution. He said the council ECAN acknowledges that the Kaiapoi River is a nutrient-sensitive receiving environment exhibiting many problems, and that ECAN can ignore it no longer. So that's got to be a positive for all the anecdotal evidence we have, how degraded a water body it is. We actually need hard data if we're going to make a case for remedial action. Sort of associated with this is the lower data on river monitoring. It's been brought up many times where we're not getting the data on water quality, and that we would hope to, and that's to enable to really to measure what's going on in our local streams and rivers compared to the national data. So there's been called for a report from ECAN to have a look in detail about where are they monitoring, what are they monitoring, and of course the new NPS will demanding that there is more intensive plan for that. There's various plan change 7 hearings continue, and you will have seen, as I circulated to you, the assessment of nitrogen loss that ECAN staff provided to the panel. Really significant stuff here, and I would really ask that we have a workshop or have a briefing about what this could potentially mean to the health and well-being of this district and its economic growth. What else? Oh yes, and Arapara right at the end of the meeting told us about the Ngaitahu statement of claim over fresh water, which is he just dropped that in there for our information, and as you've seen, it's all over the news media throughout the country this morning. So that's about it, and welcome any questions.
Thanks, Sandra. Any questions? Thank you. International Relationships, Deputy Mayor Atkinson.
I have nothing, unfortunately. We had to postpone the meeting. I had a family to deal with yesterday, so didn't have that. So, and nothing else, no one coming and going that I'm aware of.
But you have got work going on with the Passchendaele Advisory Group, which is travelling well in terms of the work there. Thanks, Neville. Regeneration, Councillor Blakey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Community Hub in Courtney Drive, the pre-consultation flyers have gone out today, I think it is, to about 80 neighbours, just telling them what is planned there before we get to a full consultation stage, so there's no surprises for them. And Regen will have a stall at the Christmas Carnival in Kaiapoi in December again to hand out info on that topic. Last week, in the weekend, recently anyway. We had a rabbit shoot on in the East End. The little buggers were digging holes in our new playing fields, and they got 33 hares and rabbits in that shoot. Allied to that is the irrigation is running now, which is making the ground nice and soft, so they can dig their holes more easily. But with the dryness starting to kick in, the irrigation running is good. The two softball diamonds are finished, and on the 12th of December there is a demonstration game. I presume that's a Saturday. Was it a Sunday? Whatever. 12th of December, anyone who wants to come down, the Softball Association are putting on demonstration games to show the public what it's all about. The pontoons, we have our first permanent resident has moved in on his boat to the pontoons, and as of 11 o'clock this morning, a second one rang and is coming, and we've got a third one who's probably coming. So we're going to save the country's coffers by returning some money to Wellington from our red zone investment. Don't hold your breath though. The Go Bus situation, as you are aware, the community board was not in agreement with the staff recommendation of the
Is that
lease.
PX? That might be, is that PX? Or is it open?
Yeah. I'm not going to not telling any details. Just to say that it's gone back to tomorrow, Thursday night. It's gone back for further discussion with the community board.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Blackie.
That's me.
Any questions? Councillor, Mike, thanks.
The rabbit shoot, what, did you use a specific outfit to do that, or was it a volunteer outfit?
No. Yeah. Anyway, any other questions for Councillor Blackie? Councillor Mealings, climate change and sustainability.
She scrambles to finish her report. Okay, so on climate change and sustainability in the last month, we're currently underway with the draft climate change policy, which closes, or consultation, which closes on the 13th of November. I'm going to be interviewed on Compass FM on Friday the 6th, so that'll be interesting. Wish me luck. The staff submission on the whole of life embodied emissions reduction framework, which is basically MB's Building for Climate Change program, that also closed. No, I thought they were going to bring that to us. Sorry, I've got a wrong date here. Scratch that. And the council submission on reducing the impact of plastic in our environment, you've just heard that here today, talked about. That is due tomorrow to be turned in, so just as well we've passed it. The Staff Sustainability Champions Group met on the 2nd of October, and they did do that. They also met again. I'll just skip forward and get to the next bit about that, sorry. The Elected Member Sustainability Strategy Steering Group, bit of a mouthful, had its inaugural meeting on the 15th of October with Mr. Blackie not sitting at that end of the table, but definitely there and present. And I'd like to think that that got off to a pretty good start. I'm quite happy to see some of the cool ideas that came out of that, and I think that it really bodes well for the future. Some neat ideas started to flow before we were even really ready to capture ideas, and also just the selection of people that we've got on there and what they can bring to the table. I think it's a good mix, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do with that. On the 28th of October, there was an eco workshop, which the Sustainability Champions put together, and the Internal Staff Sustainability Champions Group met the next day, and gosh, they discussed some really broad things there, including like various electric transport options, staff carpooling options, adding climate change considerations to our organization's compliance schedules, like whenever they go through a checklist of, your demolition, or you're looking at a building compliance, or you're just basically trying to sort of socialize the idea of sustainability and climate change, which is embedded in really everything that the council does, not just from a reporting point of view, but also just to try to sort of have that cultural change. And also incorporating sustainability considerations into all the catering. So I know some areas have done that. Like, for instance, I know Sarah has gone through with our catering and made those more sustainable, but not all departments have that happening. So, which surprised me. I thought, oh,
a lot of catering. So how
yeah,
does that get more sustainable?
yeah, well, just there is a lot, and yeah, like, even things like the 3-bin implementation progress, like that was something that we've been looking for, waiting for ages. We know that those bins have been sitting there. They've only just Linda's managed to get them all rolled out in all of the temporary accommodation. But first, what they had to do was get the external bins, because obviously all of the places where our staff are not buildings that we own. So of course, then there are implications for the property. For instance, like once we leave, as an example, the landlord will then have the rating implications of having those bins. So and just kind of negotiating things like that. But before they could have the internal bins like those there, we needed to have the external bins for it to be carted to. Otherwise, it's all very nice separating it out, but where do you put it whenever you've got it? So just really kind of bare basic things that need to be implemented, which kind of surprises me, actually. There's a lot of work to be done there, but I'm pleased to see that there are some people in various areas of our staff that are passionate about it. And I will stop waffling with this last thing, which is the 25th of November will be my first CCC Coastal Hazards Working Group meeting as an observer. So that will be interesting. I wonder what I shall observe.
Well, it's nice. It's nice that we've been invited to
exactly.
that you're doing it. So
yeah,
thank you.
I thought that was a new group, but it's actually been going for quite some time, and they've given me a stack of minutes to review from previous ones. So yeah, that should be quite interesting. I've just received those in the last day or two. So
thanks, Nikki.
So, yeah.
It's a very full report. Thank you. Just to let you know that there's a paper going to Canterbury Mayoral Forum to our climate change working group on Friday, which is a subgroup of the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, and in that I've asked that it be considered that the portfolio holders of respective councils, like yourself, there's a number out there that actually are relatively homeless. I don't mean that nastily, but it would be really great to bring your expertise and to extend that group. So that's going to the climate change group on Friday, which I chair, and that'll go to the Canterbury Mayoral Forum for its view the following week or whenever it next meets. So just to let you know that I'm following through with that, but it would be great to see that wider expertise have a home, and hopefully that's endorsed on Friday. Any questions of Nikki? Sandra?
Just really on the item you've just brought up about climate change, the Biodiversity Champions exercise, which was instigated by the Mayoral Forum, I had and I'm your representative, I had an email from Land Farm about getting together. So is there within the Mayoral Forum a biodiversity
Honestly,
subgroup?
I don't know.
And how is that? I don't think all the territorial authorities are appointed yet, but they will be. So here's another group of about 10, 11 people. What happens with them?
I'm not aware of that group, but Jim,
it's instigated by the Mayoral Forum. So can you inquire?
I'll look into it. Yep, happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Nikki? Thanks, Nikki. Okay, so I have no questions. There's no urgent general business. So now move that we, item 19, which is that we go into public excluded, seconded by Councillor Atkinson. Now declare, and the reasons below that are mentioned there. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. So we're now in public excluded. At this point, I'll adjourn our meeting. I just thought it was easier to do it now. So if we're back about 4:10. So my understanding is Adrian's got some some chocolate biscuits out there. So thank you, Adrian.